Hello and welcome back. Those of you who are pagans, happy solstice. That's actually when I'm recording this, but I think this episode will come out just before New Year, so happy New Year to all of you that celebrate those things. We're not much celebrators, we just tend to hunker down, have family time, eat, drink, be merry, that kind of stuff, but we actually don't even do gifts. It's we're very strange people. Maybe we're pagans. So, something that has been on my mind for, close to 5 years now. And I want to see if I can try to get it out of my head, out of my mouth, I should say. I want to talk about suppression today. That's what I've been thinking about a lot. I've been thinking about it because of my study of narcissism, working on the film Empathy Not Included. I've spoken to a number of self-confessed narcissists, and I've been thinking about suppression and dissociation recently. Narcissists, I'm talking about people that have MPD, malignant narcissism, that kind of thing. They have cut a part of themselves off. And that choice usually got made sometime during childhood. Some traumatic event happened and they literally cut a part of themselves off. And in extreme cases, that part pretty much dies. Some of the people I've spoken to have said that they feel this kind of emptiness inside, that there's nothing in there. Now, whether there really is nothing in there or they've just suppressed it so much that they no longer have access, I don't know, but it is like the ultimate dissociation. So I was thinking about that, and because that's not kind of how I feel, and that's not how most people feel. I think there are a number of people that do feel that, and I think when you talk about people that have these pathologies, it's like they've actually killed something inside themselves. But it's also just a human thing. We tend to suppress things we find uncomfortable. It's this kind of weird censorship. We're trying to hide stuff from ourselves. We keep hidden all the things that feel, bad, uncomfortable, painful, maybe forbidden. And it feels like it's too painful to go there. So we build a fortress around all our uncomfortable feelings. And the thing I keep thinking about is it's very human. I can think of a number of things in my life that I've completely suppressed, that I've sort of censored from myself. So it's very human, but in psychological terms, it's extremely unhealthy. In psychology, sometimes they talk about, we have these different parts and we suppress the parts we don't like. In essence, we bury them. Maybe it's like, shame or self-hatred or whatever it is. And the thing is, these things that we suppress, they don't disappear. They grow. They kind of fester. And they grow into potentially all these kinds of toxic behaviors. And therapy is used to bring out these hidden parts and help us be whole and healthy. I think that's what internal family systems therapy is about. Those of you that have done that may know, or if anybody's listening that does it, you would know. But the idea is that there's these different parts of us, and we need to reclaim them. We need to bring them back because we've disowned parts of ourselves based on a bunch of stuff that happened when we were kids. So, you could say that in human psychological terms, denial and that kind of, I'm calling it censorship, leads to a whole host of problems. So let me take that idea and that pattern and talk about family. And I think it's important because by the time you guys listen to this podcast, you will probably have spent time with your family around a table or a couch or whatever. And the family dynamic is, for most people, insane. But it got me thinking, this whole suppression thing got me thinking about a family dynamic. So let's look at, suppression or censorship in the family. Imagine for a moment, being at a dinner table. I know that's hard. With a family, and imagine that the leader, the patriarch or the matriarch, is very sort of fundamentalist in their approach to the world. And they believe that there are ideas that are dangerous. And so there's somebody at the table, maybe it's the black sheep of the family, whoever it is, maybe it's you, maybe you are the black sheep. And they begin to suppress the child. And maybe they do that because this, matriarch or patriarch, has their own trauma, and they want to cut away everything that is not perfect. They want to cut away the unclean, because what they want is a kind of, weird perfection. And I'm talking about a very fundamentalist approach, but I think many people can relate, even if the patriarch isn't super fundamental. But this need for perfection, this need to excise anything that's uncomfortable or shouldn't be spoken about, leads to a kind of, censorship that's compulsory. And you have to censor a lot. This patriarch, this matriarch has to censor a lot. So when you look at the family, do you think that's healthy? And of course, the answer is fuck no. I hope we're 7 minutes in, because that's when they penalize me before on YouTube. If I use the F word before 7 minutes, there's a problem. So of course it's not healthy. So what are the psychological implications? Well, besides the, everyone's on pins and needles, the leader of the family, and maybe the whole family, sort of pits themselves against the child. Any ideas that this child has that don't match up to the family have to be suppressed. And of course, is it good to do that? And the answer is, again, no, it's not healthy for the family. But the matriarch or the patriarch might say, well, it is healthy, because ideas are dangerous and it might lead to terrible things. So they have all these rationalizations, maybe it's you'll go to hell or whatever it is. There's some reason why suppressing this child or suppressing these thoughts isn't a problem. And, it can go from just censoring what the child is saying. And when I say child, it doesn't have to be a child. It can be a young adult as well. You can censor the child, what they say. You can forbid them to speak altogether, and you can ridicule them. So there are very toxic family dynamics where much of the family begins ridiculing this black sheep. And what happens most of the time is the black sheep just gets very quiet. Now, from the perspective of let's call this the leader, a patriarch, that's good. The problem is quiet now. The child is quiet. The bad ideas are not going to infect dinner, or not going to infect lunch, or not going to infect the family. They have this feeling like it's good. And you see that like in autocratic regimes, it always amazes me that they think that if they silence their citizens, somehow that'll make all the problems go away, which we all know never works, because it just grows. But again, they have these rationalizations. So should we suppress ideas that won't disappear? Should we have censorship in the family unit? Or, I know that's a dumb question, or is it good to try to integrate the ideas in the family, or at least listen to them and see what they are? Let's say that a family member has some weird, errant, odd ideas. Is it better to just suppress the hell out of them? Do you think that'll somehow solve it? Will they suddenly become a model citizen, or will it become a problem as the years go by? My sense is it'll become a problem. There'll be a lot of discord, but that suppression in that child, in that young adult, will not end well. So a healthier family would look like, somebody comes up with a crazy idea at dinner and you talk about it. You may hate the idea. Let's say the patriarch, matriarch, you may hate the idea. When kids come back from their first year in college and they got these insane ideas, I don't think it's good to suppress them. I think it's good to listen to what they have to say, have a discussion about it, get it out in the open, that kind of thing. And as I said before, the worst thing you can do is not only censor, but also ridicule. If you ridicule the child for their ideas and for what they're saying. So let's go back to psychology. So, we may feel like you have to suppress parts of yourself because they're dangerous. They feel dangerous. And maybe they are dangerous. Who knows? Let's say some of them are dangerous. Let's say you have an impulse to hurt somebody and you bury that. Most psychologists will say it doesn't go away. It tends to fester, and it tends to become more toxic, and then potentially does become dangerous. And those movies about the person that's so suppressed, and then one day they just lose their shit completely. And you've seen people like that in your life. The person that seems so quiet, and suddenly they snap, and they're snapping not because they're a toxic person. It's because probably what's happened is they've buried something. Maybe their environment forced them to bury it as a child, and then they took over the job of burying that part of themselves, and then it suddenly comes roaring out. So my sense of it, not a psychologist, of course, just have my life experience. My sense of it is that the best thing to do is to bring the stuff that's buried out into the light. And when I say this, do it in therapy. You can certainly do it with friends, but like therapists tend to know how to do this very well. So yeah, bringing stuff out into the light, like sunshine, is the best disinfectant for toxicity. That means, transparency and exposure. The last thing you want to do is hide stuff from yourself. And we know what that's like. It's the stuff that we're uncomfortable about. Maybe, if it comes up in public or it gets exposed, suddenly our faces go red, and there's this thing about us that we're not comfortable with. And we really believe, I know it's bizarre, but we really believe that if we just bury it, somehow everything will be fine. Somehow we'll be happier, and then what you see is this kind of insane kind of happiness, this like vibrating at an insane level of everything's fine, yay, yippee, this kind of like weird thing that goes on. It's very inauthentic, and it's inauthentic because we're fragmented from other parts of ourselves. So I think it leads to problems. So like, here's the thing. Most people so far would agree with me, yep, that kind of suppression and that sort of self-censorship of the other parts of ourselves are bad. And also, like, very often the things that we're very ashamed of, that are buried inside of us, are keys to our own freedom, are keys to our own, power and authenticity. So it's good to actually get in there and to look and see what they are. So as I said, most people would agree that burying the stuff is bad. But then when it comes to society, everything changes. It's so interesting. Like I see in society, there are people saying, no. That's one thing, but we must censor things in society. We must censor ideas because it'll make society better. But will it? I mean, if society is a metaphor, or I should say the family unit is a metaphor for society, is it good to suppress stuff? I mean, is it true? Is it really going to make it better? I feel like, we've been terrified into thinking, and I'm saying this particularly the last few years. We've been terrified into thinking that if you discuss or expose an idea to the light that is uncomfortable, that is problematic, it'll be the end of civilization. And again, like, if you've listened to my podcast, you would ask yourself, well, who benefits from that? Who benefits from the belief promoting the fear that if you look at something, that if you discuss something, that if you debate something, it's the end of civilization? Are there things that should be censored? Yeah, probably. Are there things like that should be kept from young children, for instance? Yeah, absolutely. Like, keep death away from, keep like seeing death away from children, keep porn away from them. And when I say see death, I mean, stuff on television and on the internet. Like, keep those really traumatic things away from children, keep porn away from children. So yeah, there's a line. I'm not sure where the line is. But this generic obsession with censoring everything we don't agree with does not create a healthier society. Now, some people say, well, Mark, in the West, there is no censorship. And I'm like, well, it's a bit like, when you believe in the cult leader and you believe in the cult and the people leaving are talking about being suppressed, you don't think they're being suppressed because you're not being suppressed because you believe in the narrative. So you haven't pushed up against the boundaries of the narrative, so you haven't been punished. They have been punished because they're questioning. You are not questioning. So it's funny when people say, well, Mark, there is no censorship. There's censorship in like North Korea, or China or Russia, but there is no censorship in the United Kingdom, and America and, Australia. They're free countries. Yeah, that's really cute. That's really cute. I like that. I like that some of you think that. And I know because you tell me this, you know, the comments. My sense is that there are multiple lines of inquiry in society that are being silenced. And there's blanket terms being used like disinformation or misinformation. Now, who gets to decide what is and is not misinformation? You know, and what is and is not disinformation? And funnily enough, you know, when you look at the great electronic oracle, the news, it's mega corporations, and pardon the metaphor I'm about to use, but it's mega corporations with their puppeteer hands so far up the media's ass, making the media parrot a whole bunch of things that, and they'll tell you what is misinformation and what is not. I find it very funny. There's this meme that's going around the internet. It's been going around for quite a while. What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth? And the joke is about 6 months. And it is interesting because, you know, in the last few years, a whole bunch of things have been censored. People have been deplatformed for saying certain things. And there's all these notices at the bottom of YouTube videos, and people have their accounts canceled. And then maybe 6 months later, maybe a year, maybe 2 years later, the very thing that those people were censored for, canceled for, is now on the news. Like people are saying, like, "Oh my God, look at that!" Now people don't look back at the people that were censored. It's almost like they don't want to deal with that. But it's so interesting that and it's funny, you know, maybe it's this feeling of like this looking up at God, looking up at Big Daddy or Big Mommy. You know, like the media to me is very patriarchal. And I say that because a lot of my audience likes that word. So let's use that word. The media is very patriarchal, you know, and the problem is we like to think that we think for ourselves, but we literally listen to the news, and if they say it, then it must be true. Now, other people were saying the same thing a year ago, and they were all called horrible names. Now, you know, I don't know what Anderson Coopers or whoever it is, you know, the great gods of the electronic oracle are saying these things, and everyone's nodding their head saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." Well, other people did know that, and they were silenced. You know, there are some people that have been literally scrubbed from the internet. It's like they don't exist. So as I said, you know, you have mega corporations making these decisions. You know, the reason, by the way, that, you know, this is really interesting. Back in the days of Nixium, I could never understand why Raniere and Bronfman and the other members of the legal department kept on engaging new lawyers all the time. And I thought it was only because they felt they couldn't find lawyers to do what they wanted to do. But I also realized they wanted to maybe this is true, have law firms that had worked with them so that the law firms were conflicted, so that those law firms could never work against the cult. And what I think might happen as well in media is so many corporations are putting a lot of money into media organizations. And I think sometimes the reason they might be doing that is because not only do they want to advertise their product, but they can then control what the media organization is going to say. I know some people will be horrified. So that's not true. Journalistic integrity, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think that died a long time ago. If a corporation gives a newspaper money, that newspaper is not going to speak out against the corporation or any of its holdings and companies that create products. They're just not going to do that because they're going to lose a lot of money. So you have people up on the top floor making decisions, you know, telling the producers, like, don't talk about this, don't talk about that, don't talk about that. And it's just taken as, well, we just don't talk about that. You know, nobody ever really questions it. Well, they do. The minute they question it, they get destroyed. You know, it's interesting, this whole conversation I'm having. I cannot tell you how many times people in my comments section talk about the dangers of misinformation. You know, I'll talk about something. I mean, this very conversation I've just had with you. They'll say things like, yes, but you have to understand the dangers of misinformation. You know, yes, but, you know, you have to be responsible, Mark, because there is misinformation. There is disinformation. I'm like, is there? Like, how do you know there is? Like, I feel like people have literally been watching the boob tube, the electronic oracle, getting the gods to tell them what reality is, and then turning around to me and many other people in the comment sections literally parroting the very narrative they just heard, believing perhaps that the media can never be wrong. You see why I talk about these things? Because what I'm talking about are like cult-like patterns. They literally have been watching the news and they write this stuff. And my feeling is, given that I worked in news for a while and I think I do understand a little bit how it works, I literally think people have been spoon-fed a psyop. And what we need to do is really think for ourselves. The media, the media machine, has convinced us, that it's the worst thing in the world to look at these things that you've been told are disinformation or misinformation. You must suppress them. So they'll suppress them for you. And then if you happen to find somebody in your life that's talking about those things that should be suppressed, then you want to suppress them. There was somebody that said something really interesting the other day. It was Brett Weinstein on a podcast. Maybe it was Modern Wisdom. He said he came to an understanding that when the news does propaganda, and I know only your team doesn't do propaganda, only the other team does propaganda. I understand that. Okay. But when they do their propaganda, it's not so much that they're trying to convince you. They're trying to tell the tribe what to believe. It's sort of like marching orders. These are the things to believe. And he came to that conclusion. And I think that might be true, because some of the stuff I see on the news, some of the stuff I see on television, they're just blatant lies. I mean, they are serious, serious fucking lies. And you think to yourself, like, do they know it's lies? I mean, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it's literally like marching orders. So I feel like everybody's caught in this thrall of censorship. You know, you must censor, you must shut down any dangerous opinions. And it's sort of like the matriarch or the patriarch. Let's choose the patriarch. People love talking about the patriarchy. It's like the patriarch at the dining room table who uses their fist and their yells and their screams to their family member to silence them. And I know people say that's different, Mark. That's not the same. You know, they're real dangers. The patriarch probably thinks there's real dangers too. I think that what I'm describing to you is exactly the same. It's an isomorphic metaphor for what I'm talking about. You know, is what I'm talking about really that different from the fire and brimstone patriarch suppressing speech in the family unit? You know, the asshole who doesn't allow conversation that falls outside the boundaries of anything other than what he thinks it's acceptable. Don't you think that's toxic? You know? And we don't want to believe that our suppression of others' thoughts and opinions is equally toxic. You know, it's weird. We have this fragmentation of self to hide the things that are uncomfortable, but it never ends well. I mean, think of a single time where somebody who had some buried part of themselves that it ended well. It never ends well. You know, I was thinking about, it's a very emotional story to me, but years and years ago, I had a friend who was dying of a very, very aggressive cancer. And I sat with her the last few days of her life. And she finally, because I kept on saying, you know, because I felt something was bothering her. And she finally, towards the very end of her life, I think it was the day before she passed away, she finally shared a secret with me that truly unburdened her. I mean, she just cried and cried and cried. And it wasn't even something she had done in her life. It was something that a family member had done to her. I'm not going to get into details, I'm sure you can imagine, that had plagued her and haunted her whole life. And I can tell you for sure that before she passed away, the feeling of freedom and the feeling of being unburdened was absolutely extraordinary. And it got me thinking a lot about the stuff that we bury. And that's why I keep looking at what's happening societally. You know, when we suppress stuff, it's not healthy. But in a society, when you have a system of suppressive governance, eventually it ends in revolt. And we're now seeing the revolt. And just, you know, I would just warn you, be careful that you don't call a revolt against suppression misinformation in some kind of attempt to be part of the tribe, in some kind of attempt to appease, you know, the electronic oracle, big mommy and daddy. Be careful we don't mislabel things that are really a reaction to an enormous amount of suppression that has been going on for quite a while, because we are now in a revolt. And the one thing I want to say as well is, for those of you who have heard the opening of my podcast, who listen to my audio podcast, there's a 1-minute opening in there. And I talk about, sacred cows and pissing people off and upsetting people. I know this is going to upset people. I know it is. But if I haven't upset you in 2024 yet, there's always hope in 2025. I am deliberately pushing up against sacred cows, religious beliefs, religiosity. I'm pushing up against those things because I believe that hiding those things and just calling them names to sort of neatly excise them from our lives is not the way to go. As always, my friends, stay curious and Happy New Year.